Morning, guys. So, there will be a set of new videos coming up, but to be able to base reality on reality, we need to look at some things. There are people who are saying that they have discernment ministries. There are fivefold ministries listed in Scripture. Discernment ministry is not a ministry, or it would be listed as a ministry. Now, do people use discernment to help minister? Absolutely. But there is not a ministry that is called discernment. So, here we have our discernment ministries biblical. There's no discernment ministries in the Bible. Then there's an exclamation point that says, yes, there is. And this person is using a thumbnail that they created with 2 thumbs up, which happens to be a Freemason sign of approval for being inside the lodge. So, very first thing that comes up if you put in discernment ministries is this one up here that says warning to all discernment ministries. That one's from Revealing Truth. Most discernment ministries fail to follow the rules. That one's by Wretched Radio. Now, Revealing Truth and Wretched Radio are bipolar opposite ends of the spectrum, where one of them is exposing the other one. Okay? This guy, Trey Van Camp, warning: discernment videos are changing you, not for the better. What discernment ministries probably won't tell you. Objective believer. This guy with his hand on his chin doing a Freemason hand sign. Your favorite Bible teacher is a heretic. The issue with discernment ministries. The problem with discernment ministries. Dr. Jordan B. Cooper. Charles Stanley dies. Discernment ministries wonder about impact it will have on Andy's ministry. A warning for discernment ministries and YouTube channels. 10 dangers of discernment ministries. Okay? So if you put in discernment ministry, this is the top search of what comes up is this list of people who are claiming to have discernment ministries, who are now defending the fact that they have discernment ministries. Somebody's going to come to me and say, Brian, you've got a discernment ministry. I don't have a discernment ministry. I am a Redding, California local who has firsthand observation of Bill Johnson, Bethel Church, and Chris Valentin and their entire group, and I can very clearly see them using their Freemason habits, and I've studied to be able to prove that those are Freemason habits so that I could be able to warn other people in my own family to get out of Bethel. So I'm not doing this as a discernment ministry. You guys want to call it that? That's cool. I am discerning the right that they're doing from the wrong that they're doing. But what I'm doing is loving my brothers and sisters in this town. I'm loving my family in this town. I'm not going at this stuff with Sean trying to go after me because he doesn't know how to rightly divide scripture. I'm sorry, Sean. We'll have this conversation about this soon, but so Sean has this thing up here that says that discernment ministries are okay. So you can go back down here to where it says that discernment ministries are good. That one. Okay? So Sean says, yes, discernment ministries, but Scripture says fivefold ministries. Discernment is not one of them. So what does the Bible? The Bible is the litmus test. The Bible is what we weigh everything against. What does Scripture say about discernment? Because that's how we're to come to our conclusion.
Shabbat Shalom. I love the chorus. I love it. Today's teaching, yet again, is going to be a continuation of what we've kind of covered over the past 2 weeks. So cast your minds back to about 2 weeks ago. We did the teaching, Who Are We? That there's a call going out. There's a call back to covenant, to being part of the house of Israel, but more importantly, that there's a call to a wedding feast. And the invitation has gone out to everyone. But as we know from the parable, some people are too preoccupied with the things of this world. And either within the believing body, they would rather focus on the things of this world and maybe heed the call to the wedding feast. And then last week, we kind of covered this idea of having ears to hear, because if this call has gone out, well, then we need ears to hear it. And we linked this, ears to hear, eyes to see, hearts ready to receive, all these types of things. And what could possibly get in the way of that, whether it be religious dogma, our thoughts, our own deceitful hearts even. Today I want to look at discernment. Because if there's a call that's gone out, we need to rightly discern it. Are we hearing from the Spirit? Are we hearing the voices of demons? Or the majority of the time, is it our own deceitfully wicked hearts? So I want to look at this. And really, there's two main legs to discernment. I was thinking about this. There's one leg which is to do with the more kind of practical application of everyday life, how to make good decisions according to biblical wisdom, if that makes sense. So, and then the other leg is how to discern Scripture. How do you... So a really good example of this would be Acts chapter 15, when the apostles, they realize they've got this influx of new believers who have not been raised in the Father's ways, and they make a decision, they make a judgment. They go, okay, considering the Torah and what the Torah has to say, we will now make this decision. So you see this kind of process of hashing a matter out, and then a decision being made from that. So, and discernment is part of that process, because it's one thing having the knowledge. So all of us are here today because we understand that the Torah and the prophets are still applicable to our lives. Now, that's just the knowledge of it. You know to turn up here today. But then what's the wisdom in maybe applying some of these Torah principles in a world so far removed from the context it was originally given in? And also, how do you apply Torah principles, for example, in a society where Torah is now no longer the law of the land? We're in captivity. This is what the apostles were dealing with to a certain degree, because yes, they had a certain amount of autonomy, but they were still also under the bondage of Rome. We don't even have that certain amount of autonomy anymore. We're just in bondage. So how do we, it takes discernment to be able to apply the Father's ways in our lives, and also to that good fruit bear of it. So those are the two main legs of discernment. Today is going to be more of like the broader sort of principles that we can apply. Because when it comes to application, this is more of on a case-by-case basis. I can't tell you how to apply biblical wisdom because you're going through this situation and you're going through that situation. That's as it comes basis. And as we grow, we get better at applying the Father's ways. So I can only kind of give you general principles. However, we can maybe start covering some of the other leg, which is discernment of Scripture. And after this, unless the Father throws a curveball, I'm kind of thinking to kind of go down this road of the apostles, like Peter, James, and Paul, make some bold claims. Yet they're completely anchored in the Torah and the prophets. And a lot of people they take at face value, say what the apostles said, but they don't understand the thought process and how it actually goes from Torah through to prophet, through to the New Testament. So maybe breaking down some of these things, things like the difficult words of Paul, because coming in. So how, because people we haven't had the upbringing that they've had. They were raised in Torah, they were raised on the prophets. So many things they said it went without say. And we're having to rediscover these things. So anyway, discernment. Let's dive in. But just so you guys are kind of aware where I'm thinking of moving forward. Matthew 16, verse 2, and he, Messiah, answering, said to them, so he's speaking to the Pharisees here, when it is evening, you say fair weather, for the heaven is red. And in the morning, stormy weather, for the heaven is red and overcast. You know how to discern the face of the heaven, but you are unable to discern the signs of the times. So he's calling them out for their spiritual blindness. Now, we do know that by this stage, the religious system had become infected with a lot of religious dogma, so it was blinding maybe their eyes. Now, the word here for discern is diakrino. So those of you who have maybe watched Curtis's and I ongoing series where we're talking about judgment, we've kind of covered these words, but I'm going to break them down again. Diakrino, it means to separate, to make a distinction, to learn. So this idea of weighing things up, being able to separate ideas and this kind of mitigation process. Think of it as what the process that occurs leading up to a decision, right? This people coming together. Diakrino. Now, diakrino, this is the process that will lead to krino, okay? The word krino means to judge or to pronounce an opinion. So it's to pass sentence, would be a good way of putting it. So before you pass sentence, you want to weigh up all the evidence, okay? This is essentially what's going on, because it's foolish to pass sentence when you haven't weighed everything up, right? And this is what Yeshua is saying. You know when he says, do not judge, lest you be judged? This is what he's referring to. He's saying, do not pass sentence, lest you have sentence passed on you. So diakrino is the process that will lead to krino. And Yeshua is saying that they know how to discern the face of the heavens, but they can't discern the things that matter. They didn't know what time they were in, i.e. that he was walking in their midst, that the Messiah was there. Something was preventing them from being able to go through this process of weighing things up, of to contend with matters, like Jude says, contend for the faith that was handed down. Jacob, the reason he's named Israel is because he wrestled, he contended. So again, krino. I like what this dictionary says, to pass judgment upon, thereby to seek influence. So to make a judgment based on taking various factors into account. So you krino because you've already done the diakrino, essentially. And this is very much linked to the judicial process. So let's look at some of Paul's words. Should any of you, so he's holding the Corinthians to account here, and we're going to see what he's talking about. Should any of you, holding a matter against one another, so there's a matter of contention, of strife within the assembly, go to have sentence passed on you. This is krino, so for the judgment, before the unrighteous, and not before the set apart ones. As we're going to see that whatever was going on there, that they were holding lawsuits against each other, but rather than entering into, a Matthew 18 process, they were going straight to the unbeliever to have sentence passed on them. And this is what Paul's holding them to account for. Do you not know that the set apart ones shall pass sentence on the world, on the cosmos will be the word there, so heaven and earth. And if the cosmos is to be sentenced by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? So other translations will put trivial matters. Now the word here is criterion in the Greek. It's not like in the English we get judge, and it muddles things up. The word here for criterion, the instrument or means of trying or judging anything. So it's the process that you're doing, again, to do judgment, like this separating, this discerning. So he's saying, if the cosmos, and he's pointing to, the Great White Throne judgment and the millennial reign, he's saying, if the world, the cosmos, is going to have sentence passed on it by you, why is it that you can't even hash things out among you, is what Paul's saying. Do you not know that we shall pass sentence on messengers, on angels? Right? He's going right to the weightier matter to expose their folly in the little, okay? This is a very Hebraic thing. It's hyperbole. He's using the weightiest matter of all, the judging of the cosmos, and he's saying, look at what you're doing in the flesh. It doesn't match up. By the way, this is maybe a passage, 1 Corinthians 5 and 6, that I'm thinking of in the future, really break it down, because there's actually a lot of humor, sarcastic humor going on here. If you then have the criterions of this life, so remember, this is the process of mitigation, of hashing things out before the passing of sentence. Do you appoint them as judges, those who pass sentence, who are least esteemed by the assembly, i.e. the unbelievers? Okay? It's essentially what Paul's saying. In the weightier matter, it will be Messiah and his bride judging the cosmos. But you in the shadow picture are going to the unbeliever. Imagine putting that to the weightier picture. It would be profaning it. I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise one among you, not even one, who shall be able to diacrino between his brothers? Now, diacrino, he's essentially saying, notice that wisdom is linked to this. Wisdom is linked to this diacrino, the bit leading up to the passing of sentence. And he's saying that this is to your shame. So why go to those without biblical wisdom to be sentenced? And unfortunately, this is something the religious world has really dropped the ball on, because people are going to take their problems to the unbeliever. Now, there is some wisdom in the unbelieving world, psychologists and this kind of stuff, but it will be void of the biblical principles. And really, as Paul would say, it's a shame on us, right? It's a shame on us. 1 Corinthians 2, is everyone with me so far? And we have received not the spirit of the world, but the spirit that is from Elohim, in order to know what Elohim has favorably given us, which we also speak, not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the set-apart spirit teaches, comparing spiritual matters with spiritual matters. But the natural man does not receive the matters of the spirit of Elohim, so they are foolishness to him. And he is unable to know them because they are spiritually discerned. This word, anakrino. So again, remember, anakrino is the bit before the decision-making process. It's what you see in Acts 15, before James stands up and says, right, this is what we're going to do. Right, Peter brings something, Paul brings something, that they're doing this diakrino. So I bring this up because if you don't have the spirit of Elohim, you cannot discern spiritual matters. You cannot weigh biblical things up, which means that if you can't weigh them up, you then can't make a biblical decision. So the question then becomes, what spirit are we led by? Are we led, because Paul's saying we've got the spirit of Elohim, but again, our hearts have a way of deceiving us, right? And I've also put here, do we have an appearance of godliness but deny its power? Paul says in, I think it's 2 Timothy 4, that these people within the body have a form of godliness but deny its power, i.e. the ruach, always learning, never coming to the knowledge of truth. Because if this is what we're entertaining, if we're blocking the voice of the ruach, we're actually preventing ourselves from discerning biblical matters, whether it be scriptural or whether it be application to our lives. Hebrews 5, concerning, so he's just gone through the whole idea of Melchizedek, Yeshua being a priest like Melchizedek. So that's the context. Concerning whom we have much to say, and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. So remember last week's teaching being dull of hearing. If you're dull of hearing, you're not going to be able to hear the message, and if you lack discernment, well, what you do hear, you're not going to know how to apply. For indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Elohim. And you have become such as need milk and not solid food. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. So I absolutely love this passage, because look, when the book of Hebrews was being written, what was the word of righteousness? There was the Torah and the prophets. No New Testament at this time. And the writer of Hebrews is saying that to be mature, you've had to practice the word of righteousness. You've had to apply it, and that this leads to being able to discern between good and evil. Well, the Torah defines good and evil, right? Choose today, obey my commands, choose life. But here we see that basically the discernment comes with maturity. Discernment comes with time. It comes with experience, and you need the word of righteousness and to be experienced in it. This is why, when we first come to the faith, sometimes we're very to the letter, right? This, that, and if it wiggles ever so slightly, because we don't, again, we read it as black and white, but then as we grow, we realize, well, how do we apply these principles in a fallen world, in a world where we're under captivity, where we're so, how do you apply the principle if your neighbor's donkey is in a ditch? I've not had to wrestle with that one recently. I don't know about you, but how do I apply that to today? Well, we've got 4x4s, we've got cars. Do you see what I mean? And again, the rulings of the apostles, Acts 15. These were people that they grew up on the Torah and the prophets and rightly applying them. And not only that, Yeshua chose them because they didn't have the religious mind warping going on to infect what had been going on. And they were experienced. And what did they say in Acts 15? All these new believers, look, just don't throw it all on them in one go. Let them come every Sabbath, so keep the commandments. And the 4 rulings they gave was so that they couldn't go to a pagan temple. They couldn't be mixture. There couldn't be mixture going on. Now think of the Torah principle behind that, right? They're taking these principles and going, okay, they're diakrino, and now let's krino. Let's make a judgment or a right ruling. The word here, diakrisis, again, distinguishing, discerning. The ability to distinguish, right? It's this, and again, just like diakrino goes to krino, diakrisis goes to krisis, the decision. Okay? So, here, if you're immature in the word, you've not been doing it, you're going to struggle to weigh things up in terms of good and evil. Okay, is everyone with me so far? Cool. 1 Kings 3. At Gibeon, Yah appeared to Shlomo, to Solomon, in a dream by night, and Elohim said, ask what I should give you. And Shlomo said, shall you then give your servant an understanding heart, to rule your people, to discern between good and evil? Remember what the book of Hebrews just said. For who is able to rule this great people of yours? And again, the English is pretty good, but you lose a lot of nuance when you actually look at the Hebrew. So here you have venatata leavdecha, so give to your servant lev shomea. It actually means a heart to hear, a hearing heart. And here, like the English is putting understanding. The word in orange there is shema. This is the root word. And then it says lishfot et amcha, to judge your people. The word there is so here, this word here, if you take the sheen, the pei, and the ta sound, I'm forgetting already. The tet, thank you. That means to judge, not to rule. It means to pass sentence. So you know you have krino in the Greek. The Hebrew equivalent is shafat. Okay? And then to distinguish between good and evil, that's fine, for who is able to rule this great people of yours. So really, we've got a better translation of give to your servant a hearing heart. So again, think of last week. We need ears to hear. A hearing heart to judge your people, to pass sentence on them, to discern between good and evil. So there's your diakrino, this process of discerning. For who is able to judge, again, to judge, not to rule, this great people of yours. Kings were expected to pass sentence in both good context and bad context. And the word of Yah, and the word was good in the eyes of Yah, that Shlomo had asked this. So Elohim said to him, because you have asked this and have not asked for yourself long life, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself discernment to understand right ruling. The Hebrew there is actually discernment to hear right ruling. So discernment is the word bean, okay? What we have here in the English for understand is shema, to hear and do, to hear and do. So to have a hearing heart so that he can then discern mishpat, right ruling. That's the passing of sentence, a mishpat. You shafat to do a mishpat. Does that make sense? See, I shall do according to your word. See, I shall give you a wise and understanding heart. This time it actually says a discerning heart. So a hearing heart is, you need a hearing heart that can discern. Now who's the one giving that to Solomon? It's Elohim. There's a divine kind of... Now, does that mean now that God waved his big magic hand and Solomon all of a sudden was superly wise? Or maybe did Solomon have to put it into practice and grow the gift that had been put in him? Let's look at this word, beam, to discern. This is the Hebrew equivalent, or one of. To separate mentally. This is exactly the same idea as diakrino, to understand. Again, to understand, to consider, perceive. So the word being can be used as bane, which means when you're differentiating, we would say between. This between that. Now from this you get two words, bina and tevuna. Now they've put here that they both mean understanding. But the Hebraic idea of understanding is closely linked to discernment, to be able to separate and weigh things up, therefore making an informed decision, and a wise one. Let's look at what this dictionary says. It's really interesting. The background idea of the verb is to discern. Being includes the concept of distinguishment that leads to understanding, which is very interesting. The verb refers to knowledge which is superior to the mere gathering of data. It is necessary to know how to use knowledge one possesses. So again, it's not just information. So the verb yada, this means to know. It's another word that's used. It can also mean understanding in the sense of ability. It can also mean to be perceptive. However, yada generally describes the process whereby one gains knowledge through experience with objects and circumstances. Being, or discernment, is a power of judgment and perceptive insight that is demonstrated in the use of knowledge. So it's how you go about things. Are you being wise with it? Are you not? But notice that knowledge is almost the foundation of this. Then you need to know how to apply it. So the hifil stem, this is just another way of writing some of the verbs. I won't get into the grammar. It emphasizes the ability to understand. Ezra read the word of God in the presence of men, women, and those able to understand. God can make a person understand his ways or perceive them, to be able to weigh them up. His angel came to give understanding to Daniel. The participle form refers to a teacher, so one who gives discernment to his students. So this was actually the whole thing of discipleship here. From a number of instances, insight or moral understanding is a gift from God, and is not the fruit of empiricism, so gathering data and watching. It is ethical discernment. A person prays for it, and since this insight is uniquely God, he can reveal it or conceal it. So this is why Solomon asks for it in the first place. Remember that Solomon, having King David as a father, he was already very wise. Because when you read the book of Proverbs, Solomon clearly says that a lot of this he got from his father, David, which means David was very wise. And then Solomon's asking for divine perception, divine discernment. However, the seat of insight is in the heart, and it is the heart which discerns or fails to discern the works of the Lord, the fear of the Lord. So this is where it says that the fear of the eye is the beginning of understanding. It's actually the beginning of discernment, righteousness and justice, and his will as his word is obeyed. Now, this is what I wanted to really pick up on as well. While understanding is a gift from God, it does not come automatically. The possession of it requires a persistent diligence. It is more than IQ, it connotes character. One is at fault, or if he doesn't have it, and in fact not to pursue it will incur God's punishment. So again, people of the house of Israel, step your game up, right? Ask, and it shall be given to you. But what are you going to do with it? When one acts, right, it's not about just hearing, it's about doing. On the objective presentation of God's revelation, he will attain the ideal of the significance of understanding. Basically, the more you apply, the more you will grow in discernment. And the more you will grow. I'm trying to kind of give you a crash course on the Hebraic understanding of discernment. Now, let's read this passage again, but let's look at the Luke account. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising out of the west, immediately you say a storm is coming, and so it is. And when you see the south wind blow, you say there shall be hot weather, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to discern the face of the heaven and the earth, but how is it you do not discern this time? Now, in the Matthew account, the word here was diakrino. It's not this word in the Luke account. So you kind of get, you'll get a different angle as to the Hebraic way of thinking of discernment. The word here is dokimazo. It means to test, examine, prove, scrutinize. And it means to test it by fire. This was used of gold and silver currency to see if it had value. This is this process of putting it through the fire. The root of this, dokimos, again, tested and proven acceptable after sure examination, trial by fire. So if you wanted to know back then if your money was worth anything, put it through the fire. And this is what... Like we use this phrase, that we will be tested by fire to see whether our faith is really at where it's at. But Luke here has chosen this Greek word to give a different kind of nuance to this idea of discernment. Test whether these matters be so, is the language we would know. So testing things, and iron sharpens iron, right? This is all part of the Hebraic understanding of discernment. Let's look at some of Paul's words. 1 Corinthians 14:29. Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, let the others discern, diakrino. Let them see to make sure this prophet is not just running his mouth. Does it line up? Test it, right? If there should be a revelation to another who sits by, let the first be silent. For you are all able to prophesy one by one, so that you all learn and all be encouraged. By the way, when he says discern, Paul is not saying, make sure it resonates in your heart or spirit. That's not what he's saying. Now, hopefully you kind of understand that, no, this is to test, to vigorously test, to put it through the fire, to be able to mentally perceive. And the spirits of the prophets are subject to the spirit of the prophets. Truth does not mind being put on the stand, is what Paul's saying. Test it. See if it be so. Acts 17. I'm just trying to give you some examples of where people are using discernment. And the brothers immediately sent Shaul and Silas by way to, so that's the Bereans, who having come, went into the congregation of the Yehudim. Now notice where they've gone. They've gone to a congregation, an assembly of the Jews. What are they learning in that assembly? Torah and the prophets. So can we agree these are well versed, right? These are not just people that don't know anything. Now these were more noble than those in Thessalonica, who received the word with great eagerness and searched the scriptures daily if these words were so. The word here is anakrino. It's another form of it. Now notice it, to scrutinize. This is the process, again, before coming to a decision. The word krino means to pass sentence, to make a judgment call. So the Bereans, it's not that they were just searching and having a read, right? Oh yeah, I can find it here, it's right there. No, they were testing whether this was so. Again, they were chewing the cud, putting it through the fire. That's what it means to be a Berean. I believe the Bereans were aware of this proverb. The simple believes every word, but the clever one discerns his step. This is this word here, bean, again. He discerns his steps. He doesn't just take on everything. He goes, okay, let me test if it be so. Okay, Proverbs. Let's dig in a bit more on this discernment. The Proverbs of Shlomo, son of David, sovereign of Yisrael, for knowing wisdom, discipline, for discerning the words of discernment. Okay, so yes, understanding is apt, but you lose that nuance, right? The words there is bin is the verb, and tevuna, bina. So it comes from, it is understanding, but it's an understanding that's come through discernment. It's been tested. It's been thoroughly searched out. And this is linked to wisdom and discipline. So now you have authority linked into this. For receiving the discipline of wisdom, righteousness, right ruling, and straightness. Now the word here is mishpat. This would be a sentence. Okay, so you need, the mishpat is the equivalent of a krino, a sentence that's being passed. Notice what the process is before you get to mishpat though. You need wisdom, righteousness, again, what's the biblical definition of righteousness? And right ruling and straightness. For giving insight to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. The wise one hears and increases learning, and the discerning one gets wise counsel. So now you have community and accountability. So you're asking yourself, how do I get discernment? Okay, well, we've gone through, you can ask for it. Well, let's look at some practical application. Because remember, it's a two-way thing. Yes, Yah will grant you some discernment, but you need to work it. The wise one hears and increases learning, and the understanding one, the discerning one, gets wise counsel, which means you need some wise people, some elders in your life. For understanding or discerning a proverb and a figure, the words of their wise and the riddles. Where it says proverb here, in the Greek Septuagint, it says parable, which is a parable. So when Yeshua says to his disciples, to you, it has been given to understand the parables which were, and have the wisdom from the foundation of the earth, right? The secrets of the kingdom. You need discernment to be able to, again, it's not enough to just have the word. By the way, going back to what we said either last week or the week before, why is it that you read the scripture and sometimes you're just left scratching your head? Maybe we lack a little bit of discernment. Remember, to discern, it's not just being able to tell right and wrong, it's the ability to weigh things and to separate and to make a distinction. It's funny that a lot of the Torah focuses on not mixing things, on separating things. Proverbs 2, my son, if you accept my words, there's authority. Paul called Timothy his son. He wasn't his biological son. So the rabbi-disciple relationship, they called each other father and son. My son, if you accept my words, treasure up my commands with you, so that you make your ear attend to wisdom, incline your heart to tevunah. Again, the core of this word is discernment. Notice this, and you have to incline your heart. Think of it as softening your heart. In Jeremiah 4:4, it says, break up the tillable ground of your heart, right? Now, link this to the parable of the sower, right? You've got the seed being sown, and the rain needs to come in. Anyway, for if you cry for discernment, for binah, see, this is what you have these words, binah, being, and they're using the same English words for different Hebrew words. And lift up your voice for understanding, tevuna, again, which is being a root of this. If you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasures, then you would understand the fear of Yah and find the knowledge of Elohim. Now, it's to the glory of Elohim to what? To conceal a matter, and the glory of kings to search it out. You're going to need discernment. You're going to need wisdom. It's telling you the hidden treasures. Think of the parables, the secrets of the reign of the heavens. For Yah gives wisdom, out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding, tivuna, this discernment. Then you would discern righteousness and sentencing, verdicts, mishpat, and straightness, every good path. By the way, there's a lot of commands in the Torah that are classed as mishpatim, which means they came from a judge, a shofet, right? And if Elohim is the righteous judge, do you think maybe he's wise, right? Discerning all these things. For wisdom would enter your heart and knowledge be pleasant to your being. This is why that the word becomes an offense to those that diet on religious dogma, because they don't have wisdom. Therefore, the knowledge of Elohim is not pleasant to their being. Discretion would guard you. Tevunah, discernment, understanding would watch over you, to deliver you from the evil way, from the man who speaks perversities. Now, we read this and we think of really obviously bad things, right? Perversities. It's actually a lot more nuanced in the Hebrew. The word here is tafucha. It means a perversity or a fraud, or generally something that's contrary to truth. All of a sudden, that's now quite broad. Something that's contrary to the truth, a bending of truth. And what's really interesting, the Septuagint here, it says that it's to guard you from the man speaking nothing trustworthy. The word there for trustworthy is pistos. Now, pistos is also, or pistis, is the Greek word for faith, emunah. So these perversities, they don't have to be obvious. They're things that are contrary to truth and that actually speak against the faith. Right now, there's a lot of things cloaked with the veil of the living Elohim, but they're actually against the faith. They're perversities. It's a lot more subtle a word than this obvious, he's blaspheming. It's a lot more subtle than that. So discernment will guard you from this, from the whispering sweet nothings. Does this make sense? Those who leave the paths of straightness to walk in the ways of darkness. The Torah is a light unto my feet. These people, because they're listening to these sweet nothings, it's taken them off the path, which means they were on it in the first place. This made me think of John 3, verse 20. For everyone who is practicing evil matters hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed. But the one doing the truth, again, what is truth in the first century? The Torah. The one doing the truth comes to the light so that his works are clearly seen that they've been wrought in Elohim. I believe this is speaking of the light of accountability, the light of a body, the light of fellowship, discipleship. Notice that these sweet nothings will take you away from that. Remember that the understanding, the discerning one seeks wise counsel, which is why I always really worry about people that are a law unto themselves. Who rejoice to do evil, they delight in the perversities of evil, whose paths are crooked, and they are perverted in their ways. Again, the word here, perverted, is lose. Lose is the opposite of shuv or teshuvah. Teshuvah means to turn to. This means to turn aside. So these sweet, basically, discernment will guard you from turning from losing, from coming out of a state of repentance. Does this make sense? To deliver you from the strange woman, there she is, a harlot of many faces and many dresses, from the foreigner who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth, and has forgotten the covenant of Elohim. She's forgotten who her first love is. Think of the message to the 7 assemblies. You have forgotten you're doing many good works, right? But you have forgotten your first love. This is what discernment guards you from. Again, we read these passages and we think of the evil people and those that have, gone into apostasy. We use these big, bold words, and actually Proverbs is saying, no, this is nuance, it's within the body. Proverbs 23:23. Buy the truth and do not sell it. Wisdom, discipline, and binah, discernment, understanding. What does this make you think of? Buy the truth. Oh, I heard it in the back over there. I advise you to buy gold from me refined in the fire so that you become rich. Again, remember that the Hebrew understanding of binah is you put it through the fire. It stands the test. Now, what does the gold make? I believe the gold will be used for the crown. See, I am coming speedily. Hold to what you have, that no one take your crown. So again, buy the truth, do not sell it, which should also bring up allusions to the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 were wise, 5 were foolish. They were all asleep, but they all woke up. What did the wise say to the foolish? Go and buy elsewhere. Hold on to what you have. Which means when Yeshua says, buy gold from me, refined in the fire, again, wisdom, discipline, understanding. My son, give me your heart. Let your eyes watch my ways. Again, this idea of authority, of teaching. For a whore is a deep pit, and a strange woman is a narrow well. The word there, tsar, it means to narrow tide, straits, or distress. Or think tribulation. This is why when you entertain this kind of stuff, things happen in your life. Bad stuff happens in your life, because a strange woman is a narrow well. Like, this is what, look, we've all made decisions, and then afterwards we've gone, oh, what an idiot, and then we pay the consequences of it. None more so with our spiritual lives. She too lies in wait as for a prey and increases the treacherous among them. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? So who has contentions? Who has complaints? Who feels hurt without cause? Who has redness of eyes? These are good questions to ask. Well, he's going to tell you who. Those staying long at the wine, those going in to search out mixed wine. What in the Hebraic mind, what is wine a symbol of? Doctrine and teaching. So you've got, and these are mixed. Remember again that mixed wine was usually mixed with honey to mask its bitter taste. So it tastes good, but it may give you an upset stomach. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it gives its color in the cup as it flows smoothly. When it appeases to the senses, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. In the end, it bites like a snake, it stings like an adder. Why your eyes look on strange women, and your heart speaks perversities. Again, this is this word tafucha, things that are contrary, that are against the faith, though no matter how subtle. So he's saying when we're entertaining this spiritual adultery, because we've got a lack of discernment, our heart starts to say things that are maybe contrary to the faith. And unfortunately, this is what we've inherited from our forefathers. Praise the Father that he's actually starting to pour out some wisdom. And you shall be as one lying down in the midst of the sea, and as one lying at the top of the mast, saying, they struck me, I was not sick. They beat me, I did not know. When shall I wake up? Let me seek it again. And essentially what you're seeing here is not heeding discipline or reproof. And they keep doing it over. Who here, someone has come to you for advice, and you've given them sound biblical advice as best as you know how. They do not heed it, and then they're surprised why things go bad, and then they continue to not heed your advice. And you're thinking, right, this is what you're seeing. Now this should remind us of what we covered last week, the bitter roots. Lest there should be among you a man or a woman or a clan or a tribe whose heart turns away from Yahweh Elohim to go serve the mighty ones of these nations, lest there should be among you a root bearing bitterness or wormwood. And it shall be when he hears the words of this curse that he should bless himself in his heart. I have peace, though I walk in the stubbornness of my heart, to add drunkenness to thirst. This is why we need to seek discernment. Because if we're that undiscerning, we take on spiritual adultery without even us realizing it. And then we think we're fine. And then we wonder why things are going bad. But again, remember that the bitter root, one of the key things is that they do not heed discipline or reproof. Because they're hearing the word of the curse and they're going, meh, meh. Remember what Solomon asked for? A heart that hears, so that he can discern good and evil and make good decisions. Proverbs 5, for the lips of a strange woman drip honey, her mouth is smoother than oil. This is why all these strange teachings sound so great. But in the end, she's bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her ways are unstable and you don't even know it. You don't even realize it. Who here has experienced, I know my wife and I experienced this, but we came out of a messy Coastal congregation. It's where we met. And we were out of it for quite some time. And then we went back just to say hello one day. Like, we got invited. My goodness, we won't be doing that again. Because once you're out of it for a while, I mean, I knew it was bad. But then you go back and you realize, wow, it was really bad. The ways were unstable, but they don't even know. Again, it's the spiritual blindness going on. Keep your way far from her. Do not come near the door of her house. Then you shall howl in your latter end when your flesh and your body are consumed, and shall say, how I have hated discipline, and my heart has despised reproof. Again, what does a wise, discerning person do? They go and seek wise counsel. And it says that reproof will enter deeper into a wise man than 100 blows on a fool. I have not heeded the voice of my teachers. I have not inclined my ear to those who instructed me. And then look, in a little while, I was in all evil in the midst of an assembly in a congregation. This is what happens when you show bad discernment. Then you end up taking this stuff on. You're not listening to the reproof and warnings of brothers and sisters, and all of this. What it's trying to say is, just like that, you can end up in a whole heap of mess. Just like that, within an assembly in a congregation. Drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Right? Don't go searching out mixed wine. Should your springs be scattered abroad, rivers of water in the streets. I'm giving you broad principles here. Hopefully we can see that, yes, Yah gives us wisdom and understanding if we seek it. It's an honest prayer, but we're also supposed to work it, to diligently grow that gift, and that takes accountability and one another, and coming to the light. Again, there's a real importance to being a body, because we all go through phases where we lack discernment sometimes. Sometimes we go through such crushings that our emotions cloud our judgments. Sometimes, this is why substance abuse is also got to be watched out for, because, again, it blocks this thing of, sound reasoning. Having a lack of discernment, we shouldn't be condemning one another for it. We all go through it. We all have bad days, so to speak. And sometimes, sometimes you need to hear wise counsel from someone who's removed from the situation. This is the beauty of what Curtis and I do, because yes, we share in each other's burdens, but he's not there experiencing what I go through here on the emotional level, so he's not emotionally attached, so he can give me wise counsel. This is why it's important to be a community. Discernment is intrinsically linked to accountability. With that means it takes time and humility to cultivate. You have to be humble. Like, if you're not humble, you will not get discernment. This is why these people that think they know everything, and then they're just like, the things that come out of their mouth, you're like, how can you contain all these doctrines that actually contradict one another? But anyway, discernment actually takes time and humility to cultivate. And crushing. It will get tested. Yaakov, or James, draw near to Elohim and he shall draw near to you. Notice the order. Cleanse hand sinners, cleanse the hearts, you double-minded. Remember that that discernment happens at the heart level in the Hebrew mindset. So if we're not cleansing our hearts think of all the things you need to cleanse your heart from, you're going to struggle with discernment and wisdom. But again, I bring this verse up because Elohim wants you to step out first. Right, you hear the call, right, let me do now, let me step out. But I can guarantee you, he'll meet you more than halfway, every single time. Every single time. He wants us to do the initial bit. And again, it's the same with wisdom and discernment. Do you really want wisdom and discernment? Okay, let's see. All right, let's start bringing this to an end. Genesis 41, this is Joseph and Pharaoh incident. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man. Set him over the land of Egypt. The word there being being. And Pharaoh said to his servants, could we find another like him, a man in whom is the spirit of Elohim? Pharaoh recognized that Joseph had the spirit of Elohim in him. And this is, again, what spirit are we listening to? Because if we're listening to the delusions of our own heart, remember the prophets of Jeremiah 23, they're prophesying in Yah's name, which means they're assuming they're prophesying by his spirit, yet Yah's saying they're prophesying the deceit of their own heart. This is why it's critical to know the voice of the Spirit. This is why, test to discern all spirits. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. Pharaoh recognized this. And you've got to think of the context of when this was happening. Egypt at the time was the greatest nation on earth, and it had a lot of mysteries, theosophy, all this kind of stuff. They had like a very good knowledge of the heavens, for example, and astronomy. And Pharaoh, king of the wisest nation at the time, is saying, mate, this guy, we want him. 1 Corinthians 2:10, the Spirit searches all matters, even the depths of Elohim. For who among men knows the thoughts of man except the spirit of man that is in him? So also the thoughts of Elohim no one has known except the Spirit of Elohim. This is why if we're truly Ruach-led, we will not only get discernment, but we will do things in his character that will actually please him. Yes, we've all fallen short of the glory of Elohim, but we can still be pleasing. You know, parents, you know when your children are pleasing to you, even though they fall short of the rules of the house. Deuteronomy 1, verse 13, choose wise men and discerning men, and known to your tribes, and let me appoint them as your heads. I'm bringing these two things up because I believe this is a shadow of the governance of the millennial reign. He's not going to put any old wench up to govern. She's going to be wise. She's going to be discerning. This is a key requirement for those that are going to be ruling in the millennial reign. So again, seek it, pray for it. If you get some, work it. Think of, do you remember the Give Us Our Daily Bread teaching we did? And what I said, that Yah doesn't just give you something, but it's more this idea of bless the hands of our labor. I believe it's like that with discernment. He will bless the fruit of your labor. Psalm 119, David has a lot to say about discernment, actually. Make me discern the ways of your orders, that I might meditate on your wonders. So, bear in mind that David, he would have had to write a copy of the Torah for himself because he was a king. That's a command for the king. And he's saying, make me understand them. Help me perceive them. Help me go a bit deeper. Because again, there's the surface, but then what's the spirit behind it? Make me understand, make me discern, that I might observe your Torah and guard it with all of my heart. Apparently it takes discernment to be able to guard it with all of our heart, which means now that this is linked to the greatest command, to love Elohim with all your heart, soul, and strength. Your hands have made me and formed me. Make me understand or perceive or discern that I might learn your commands. Isn't that an odd statement when this is a king that clearly knew the Torah very well and praised it and highly esteemed it? He's saying, I need to learn it. Why? Again, it's much deeper than just, keep the Sabbath. And it's much deeper than the mechanical side of it. These things actually give you an insight into his character. I understand, I perceive, I discern more than the aged, for I have observed your orders. Not only did he hear them, he did them. And again, remember, the discernment is, there's this hearing, doing, applying, refining. I have observed your orders. Not only did he hear them, he did them. And again, remember, the discernment is, there's this hearing, doing, applying, refining. For I have observed your orders. Not only did he hear them, he did them. And again, remember, the discernment is, there's this hearing, doing, applying, refining. For I have observed your orders. Not only did he hear them, he did them. And again, remember, the discernment is, there's this hearing, doing, applying, refining. From your orders I get discernment. Therefore I have hated every false way. It's helping him discern between good and evil. I am your servant, make me discern that I might know your witnesses. Again, don't you think these are odd statements for a king who has the witnesses there and the Torah there, literally, and he has access to it to the same level as what a priest would have had. He would have probably had the high priest teaching him the Torah. And he's saying, make me understand, help me see what's in there. Look at this, the opening up of your word gives life, light, giving discernment to the simple. It's not just having the word, it's the opening up of it. And I'm not talking of opening the book. I'm talking of spiritual insight. Like, you know, when we read a verse and we thought we knew what it meant, and then it's opened up, and you're like, oh my goodness. I've been having a lot of those recently. And it helps, again, it gives discernment. By the way, I believe, again, this is a Ruach thing, but you need blessed the fruit of my labor, I believe, is a key principle here. My cry comes before you, oh yeah, make me understand, discern according to your word. So again, this idea of practical application. But I really love this, the opening up of your word gives light, giving discernment, so that I can weigh good and evil and make good judgments. Daniel 12, now at that time Michael shall stand up, the great head who is standing over the sons of your people. There shall be a time of distress or tribulation, such as there never was since there was a nation until that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth wake up, some to everlasting life, some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrence. And those who have insight, again, notice insight, this idea of wisdom, something that's opened up to them, shall shine like the brightness of the expanse. And those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, hide the words, seal the book until the time of the end. Now, what did David say in Psalm 119? The opening up of your word. I honestly believe we're witnessing this right now. Knowledge is being, the scriptures are being opened up, like this spiritual veil that's been over our eyes for nearly 2,000 years. Many shall diligently search, and the knowledge shall increase. The Hebrew has a the there, it's hat, da'at. So it's not just any knowledge. It's not, scientific knowledge. It's the knowledge of his ways. And he said, go, Daniel, for the words are hidden and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be cleansed and made white, refined. But the wrong shall do wrong, and none of the wrong shall discern it. But those who have insight shall understand or discern it, i.e. what's going on in the time. By the way, I believe this is another way that we're kind of approaching the end of this age, because insight, wisdom, discernment is being poured out. The word is being opened. Last passage. See, the storm of Yah shall go forth in a rage, a whirling storm. The context of this is the judgment of the house of Israel, and then it's regathering, and then you get the renewed covenant at the end of Jeremiah 31. But it's all one passage. It bursts upon the head of the wrong. The burning displeasure of Yah shall not turn back until he has done and established the purposes of his heart. In the latter days you shall discern it, you shall know. And this is linked to the purposes of his heart. And again, the Spirit searches all matters, including the depths of Elohim. Anyway, I hope this at least given food for thought. Again, it's a really broad topic. To teach at this level, at the congregational level, I have to speak broadly. But then how you apply that in your individual life, well, it's going to look different for everyone. But pray for it, seek it, but know that He will only bless the fruit of your labor. You need to seek. You need to, again, it's to the honor of glory of Elohim to conceal a matter, the glory of kings to search it out. And I can guarantee you, when I've been searching for these pearls of great wisdom, I didn't figure it out. Again, you get this moment where it's opened and you're like, oh my goodness, but I had to do the legwork. I had to seek, I had to knock, I had to yearn. And not for knowledge, but for knowledge of my King, wanting to know Him, the giver of the knowledge. But as we grow, as we work as a body, and we grow in unity. Well, we were singing Hinei Matov earlier, to dwell in unity. As we do that, our discernment will grow and grow and grow and grow. Why do you think the apostles had such ability to wield the word in such ways? Anyway, let's stop here. Amen.